Alright, chain sharpening. This can be as easy or as complex as we make it. A lot of the videos I do on here are talking about more complex things, but for the average person it's just not required to spend that level of time and effort to sharpen a chain. But let's go through some of the basic things you can do to make it easier on yourself. Doesn't matter if you're at the very beginner level or if you're at the more advanced level. All the advanced guys should know all of this, but we'll just run through it. So the first thing we can do to make our life easy is knowing when to stop. So this chain on this saw is a little 325 semi-chisel. It has been used to cut wood. It is still in good shape. It still cuts. It has run for 2 tanks of fuel. Everything's fine. It hasn't broken any corners off. I haven't hit any foreign objects. I haven't done anything stupid with it. It still cuts. However, this is the time to sharpen it. If you sharpen it before there's any real damage, we're only going around and doing a very light touch-up. Sharpening is much quicker, it's much easier. There's nothing to remove. We don't have to worry about how much do we have to remove off each one. We're just going to go through and do the very basics. If you've hit a foreign object and you've broken corners off, you've obviously got a lot more of a job ahead of you and it's going to take a lot longer. For anyone just starting out, the best advice I can give is to sharpen frequently. Try and avoid hitting things, do all the common sense stuff, and just sharpen frequently until you get the hang of it. If you're only using the saw a few days a year to cut some firewood to heat your house and maybe you're cleaning up after a storm, you're probably not going to get a lot of practice in, but it helps if every tank of fuel you just give it a bit of a quick touch up. You'll get better at it with more practice, more experience, and it becomes much faster. So when I first started out, I didn't like sharpening. I didn't do it very often because I wasn't very good at it. It took a long time. Every time I went to sharpen a saw, it was a 20-minute, half-hour job. So you don't really want to do it. With practice and experience, it becomes much easier. It becomes much quicker. The places you can actually do it change. As you become more experienced, you can do it in more awkward situations. You may just be sitting on the ground with the bar held between your knees and you can sharpen. I'm to the point where I can square file in that way with the saw unsupported, just in my lap or resting up against my knee. I can rest it against the log and square file, things like that. But this isn't something that the average person needs to know, which we'll touch on later. So now that we've got the first part out of the way, stop before you've done any real damage. We'll move into the next thing that will help you out. Okay, the second thing that will help you out is chain tension. This applies anytime you're sharpening any type of chain on a saw. If you leave it loose, this is an extreme example, but when the chain's loose, it rocks around in the groove. It's just part of how things are. It's very hard if you're new to this and you're trying to do a good job to actually sharpen something in a decent way when you're chasing the fucking thing around all over the place. If every time you're doing it, the chain's rocking back or moving side to side and just getting in the way, it's almost impossible for you to do a quality job. So what you really want to do is come through, tension the chain, but you want to tension it more than you would have it when you're running it. So go through, make sure it's nice and tight, run more tension on it than you normally would. You want to still be able to move it by putting anything behind the tooth. Usually when you're sharpening, that'll be the file. You use that to bump it along. But with that extra chain tension, it makes everything more stable. The cutter's not going to try and rock back or forwards or side to side. You spend less time chasing around and more time actually doing a decent job of sharpening. The third thing you're going to want to do is secure the saw somehow. Obviously, the ideal setup is something like this. We're at a bench, got in a vise, got plenty of lighting. We can do what needs to be done. Obviously, this can't be done everywhere. So you can look at other options. Stump vices are great. I carry a small one with me everywhere. It's one of the still small ones. Alloy, nice and light. Just carry it around. A lot of the time, just pound it into the top of a piece of wood or a fallen log, a stump, whatever you got. If you don't have that, you can bore cut into a tree and use that to hold it. You can cut a tree around waist height, cut a groove down into the top, use a scrench coming in from the front to secure it in the groove. There's plenty of options. More advanced guys, generally you'll be sitting down, you can cross your legs and pin the saw in that. Maybe you like it up on something and you can lay across the front of it and secure it with your arms. There's 1,000 different ways. Everyone has a different technique that they like, but what you need to do is find some way of securing the saw. So the general idea of securing the saw is just like tensioning your chain. If you're chasing this around everywhere, you're not doing a good job. Most people are going to be far more accurate if they can use both hands on the file. So try and get in a position where the saw is held without you having to hold onto it. Yes, it can be done this way. I do it this way a fair bit. I'll put the cutter up against the inside of my finger, pinch it with your thumb just down on the bar, and that will stabilize it when you're filing. It can definitely be done, but if you're new to this and you don't have a lot of experience with it, try and secure the saw somehow. It might be up on a bench. I can stick the nose of it into the side. You can put down pressure on it by having something behind it so the tip of the bar is sitting on the ground while the rear of the saw is lifted a bit. That will add some stability. You can stick it up against something. Do whatever you can to try and secure it as best that you can. With time and practice, you can work out your own way. This, I'm hugging the saw with my left arm, coming across, and I can offer support to the saw that way. But especially when you're new, find a way to secure the saw. The next thing we're going to deal with is file guides. Now, get 10 people to talk about chainsaw sharpening. They'll probably tell you, most of them will probably tell you, oh, I'm better with just a file than I am with a guide. These things are just toys, they get in the way. I'm here to tell you that's mostly bullshit. I'm quite experienced. I can square file. There obviously is no file guides for that. It requires very fine alignment of the corner, the file's corner into the corner of the cutter. It's extremely difficult to do. I can do that. I am still more accurate using a file guide than I am using a regular round file. It is just part of it. The hardest thing to control is the height of the file. A file guide will eliminate that problem for you. It's not that 25 or 30 degree angle over the top that's difficult, or holding it flat or with a tilt. It's controlling the height of that file. Now I will file just like this, and I'll probably do that 5 or 6 times, but after that I want to use something to try and correct whatever I've done. Generally for me that's a Stihl FG2, which is a bench mounted file guide. I use that because I'm not all that keen on grinding. It's just not my thing. For 99% of people, they're going to be better with a guide. The important thing there is to get a decent one. If you're new at this, get a 2-in-1. It takes care of both steps of the process, the sharpening and the depth gauge. Does it in one step, will get you 95% of the way there with fuck all effort or care required. As long as you use this in a decent way, plenty of chain tension, secure the saw, apply consistent pressure, take your time and check that you've done the job right, you will get a very good chain with very little effort. It effectively makes some of these other things redundant, to be honest. Makes all the time and effort I put into learning to sharpen redundant. If these were around when I started, I wouldn't be doing this shit. If you're going to use a different kind of file guide, there's millions of them out there. That's a Stihl one that I've had laying around forever. The Husky roller guides. These things work okay. I just got a bit of a love-hate relationship with them. I find the file height to be a little higher than it should be with just about all of them. They are a pretty simple tool. A lot of people make them work for them. If you're one of those people, good for you. Stick at it. Give them a try. No harm. If I'm going to use a file guide, these are the ones I prefer. These are a velour guide. They're made of plastic, so when you throw them in a toolbox and they tumble around with all the other shit, they can bend without breaking or anything stupid like that. And most importantly, the underside of them is stainless steel. Now, I never thought this would be an issue until I used a lot of the cheaper ones of these. Over time, you will find the ones that aren't hardened. They're extremely soft, and the depth gauge digs big grooves in the bottom of them. That makes them pretty much useless. So, yeah, if you're new, start off with one of them. Honestly, the best advice you're ever going to get. Full chisel, semi-chisel, whatever. Start with one of them. You may never progress from that, and that is not a problem. If you're happy and you're competent using it and you're getting good results, keep at it. If you're interested in learning the rest of this crap, then go for it from there. The other thing I like with these, the end of that's bent down at 10 degrees, so you get a good feel for it if you're using tilt. Spend time practicing with them before you move on to just using a file. I mean, it's definitely possible. You can sharpen without all this stuff. You can just use this, but it is a lot harder. So if you're just starting out, stick with one of them. The life's going to be a lot easier. The more times you can sharpen with something like that and get a good result, you'll feel better about what you're doing. You become more confident. You'll know what to look out for. then you can move on to one of these. Or if you want to do it the hard way, move on to something like this, which is a 3 square file. Extremely difficult to use. Alright, the next bit, the important part. You've secured the chain, you've secured the saw, you've got whatever tool you're going to use. How much do you have to file it? I've made this incredibly easy for myself back in step 1 because I stopped when this still cuts. I haven't hit anything, I'm not trying to remove damage, all I'm doing is just putting a better edge back on it. This will still cut, doesn't obviously not as well as when it was first sharpened, they lose performance, it sort of drops off over time. Theoretically, you're aiming to sharpen when it's dropped off about 15%. When that occurs for you, it's going to be different depending on the saw, the chain, what you're cutting. It might last 2 cuts, might last fucking 10 tanks. I don't know. It's going to depend on what you're doing. But because I've made it easy for myself, this is incredibly simple. All I'm going to do is put a file in there and run it through till I got a bright, clean surface on everything. If you're using a file guide, that's about the level of concern that you need. You just need to make sure you've got a bright, clear surface on everything. If you only use a file, you probably need to care about a few more things. You need to know what your top plate cutting angle is and what your side plate angle is. If you're using something like this guide, it's going to give you whatever it gives you. If you're doing it yourself, you can adjust that. Common thing, people either go too low or too high, or they'll go all over the place the whole way around the chain. That leads to it cutting crooked. Gonna have to do a video proving that one at some stage, but that seems to be the leading cause as best as I can work out. Either your bar rails are stuffed or you've stuffed this up. So yeah, it's going to come down to what you're doing. I'm just going to show you what you need to look for. I'm not going to measure anything because I've got a pretty damn good idea of what's going on here. So I'm just going to go by feel. I know what it was set at before. I know what it should be. So, actually, let's get into a controversial subject. Counting file strokes. Most people will tell you it's a bad idea. Most manufacturers will tell you to do it. This is a great time to count file strokes. I'm not doing anything. I'm not trying to remove bulk metal. I'm not removing damage. I'm just basically putting a more keen edge on there. This would be like using your pocket knife. Every so often you might just strop it. If you've ever used a straight razor, you know every time before you use it, you strop the damn thing because you need it to be extremely sharp. With a saw chain, I'm just going around and I'm doing that very light touch up. I'm not going to be using a lot of pressure. I'm not going to be using a lot of strokes. Everything on this chain, having had a look at it, nothing is damaged. Everything's about the same. I can take a pretty good guess that if I give that 4 strokes, that it's going to translate pretty well to every other cutter on here because I have a decent feel for the pressure that I'm using. If you have damage, if you've broken the corner off 6 of these, don't waste your time counting file strokes because you're going to have to remove a lot of metal. You're going to keep going until you have a clean cutting surface. So that's where the confusion comes from. People will try and count file strokes when they've got damage and it won't work. Or people will say, you don't need to count them. Everything here is fine. They'll go through and knock, a quarter of that cutter off for no reason. It has its place. It works well in certain situations. It doesn't work in others. There is no black and white blanket rule for this. For this chain, if you find yourself in this situation where you've used it, it still cuts, you just want to touch it up after a tank or two, by all means, count file strokes. Just check over time that you're consistent left to right. Everyone has a preferred side. I prefer filing the left-hand cutters, which is how this is set up. However, I do a better job and remove more metal when filing the right-hand cutters. So that's something I need to keep in mind. If I'm trying to keep things relatively even on a job like this, it's quite common that if I use 5 strokes on the left, I would use 4 on the right. I'm pretty lucky in that way, especially when it comes to square filing. I like doing these left-hand cutters, which means I tend to practice that side more, and I naturally do a better job on the side that I find awkward. So I got extremely lucky with that. Everyone's going to be different. So what we'll do, I'll zoom right in. Camera angles aren't going to be great, probably not going to be able to capture this as well as I'd hope. But there's our cutter. You can see it's got a bit of dirt on it. It looks shiny because I'm pointing a light at it, but in reality it's not that good. I can see there's no actual damage across the top of the top plate here. There's nothing missing off the corner. There's nothing I'm trying to do. So all I'm doing is just putting a slightly better edge on it. There you go, I gave it a few. What's it look like? So I don't know how well I can make that sharp on the camera, but I have a bright clean edge the whole way up to the very top of this top plate. You can see it's formed a tiny little burr that I can knock off with my finger. It's formed a nice clean edge the whole way across here. Slight little burr out in the corner of the side plate. That is good. That is all it requires on this chain. Because I stopped early, we are done with that cutter. The other good thing with doing things like this, I won't bother checking that depth gauge for probably another 4 or 5 sharpenings because it's not really going to matter. So yeah, that's it for that tooth. You just move along to your next one. Obviously it's very hard to move at the minute because I've got a low chain tension. I'm not going to bother checking all of them, I've got a rough idea. And that's it, you just work your way around. So this is a 66 drive link chain. I'd expect to work around this, probably both sides, all up in total, less than 2 minutes. It's a pretty fast process. With practice, obviously everything becomes easier, and that's all we're dealing with. While we're on the subject, quickly, let me zoom in, see if we can pick it up on one of these. Okay, on this one you can sort of see it. If we focus there, you can see the very top of that drive link, not so much on the outer edge of the tie strap, but the very top of that tie link, you can see a shiny spot. I am slightly hitting that with a file. That is because I'm using that down angle, so the file's not being held level, it's being held down. I'm continuing to use the 3/16 or 4.8 millimeter file. This is a 325 chain, we're about halfway back. That happens. So far in my life, I've had 0 failures from this. I have never had a chain fail because I've filed into the tie strap. It is not recommended to do it. I'm just giving you my personal experience on this one. So that's up to you. I don't stress about it, but there is a possibility. Most of the failures I've ever had occurred down through the lower part of the rivet or the outer part of the cutter. So what will happen eventually, the chain forms little stress cracks down through here behind the rivet. It's generally from pounding them into very, very hard wood, and especially with low depth gauge settings, that occurs a lot more. But they'll start fracturing the tie strap down behind that rivet and they can break. Seems to be more of a common occurrence on the bigger saws, even with that larger, like the 404 chains. Mostly because there's more cutter to begin with. They're on the saw longer, or they do more work. They might wear out pretty quick because you do a lot of work with them, but when you sit back at the end and you look at how much wood it actually cut through its life, yeah, they cut a lot. It'll cut a lot more wood in its life than this ever will. So that's some of the very basic things you can do just to make life easier for yourself. If anyone wants to see a more advanced version of this or how to make your life a lot harder, I am more than happy to, we'll take the 3 square file and I will just go sit down somewhere and we'll try and do this. It's a lot harder to do. It takes a lot longer and is not as precise, obviously, as doing it like this, but I can competently sharpen a chain that way. So yeah, just for any of the new guys out there, stick with the basics. It'll be easier at first. Sort of intermediate users is when you're going to start worrying about all your angles, your top plate angle, your side plate angle, if everything's correct. This really exists only in the middle ground. Your beginner guys down this end aren't going to care about that. They're going to be using a file guide. They don't really need to measure anything. Your advanced guys down this end, they're not going to measure anything. They're going to look at it and be able to tell. After a while, you've got a pretty good idea. You can just pick a cutter and you will have a pretty good idea if it's right or wrong. So yeah, I can look at that cutter there and go, that's pretty good. It's probably got about 75 or 80 degrees of side plate angle in it. It's a semi-chisel, so you're measuring it slightly further down. You get a pretty good feel. Like we can go to the one in front there. I got a rough idea just by looking at it that that's in line with what's required. Your intermediate guys is where you're going to actually probably be measuring that sort of stuff. Your new beginner guys, don't bother. Like I said, use a guide. It will form the correct thing for you. A lot of people would have seen some of the basic advice from chain manufacturers about activating the chain brake to hold the chain in position. Generally regarded by most people as a waste of time. However, the greatest square filer I have ever seen in action does that. He releases the brake partially and moves the chain forward. He does a lot of stuff that a lot of people who at least claim to know what they're doing would say is wrong, but he is exceptional at what he does. So just keep that in mind. Everyone has a different technique. Just because you see me doing it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. There's hundreds of other people showing you how to sharpen. Their techniques may or may not work for you. Just practice, experiment. Over time, you'll get your own technique, your own rhythm, and everything just comes together. It will take a lot of time. I highly recommend you buy some cheap, buy a couple of chains, a couple of spare ones. Just buy the cheap ones if you want, and just practice. Spend a bit of time practicing. Over time, you will get better and better at doing this. But yeah, that's it for today. We'll leave it at that.